Hello, my name is Mark Hazen, founder of Benevolent Support Services. Every year, our President delivers his State of the Union address to reassure us that all is well with our Commander-in-Chief at the helm. But is it? Is everything well? Are we as a nation doing fine? Many of us don't think so. I thought it would be revealing for an ordinary citizen to give a State of the Union address. So here it goes. A State of the Union address from an ordinary citizen with boots on the ground and eyes wide open, offering a Christian perspective. They keep coming. From all over the world, people bring their hopes and dreams to our shores to begin life anew. They come looking for freedom, peace of mind, and opportunity. Well, why shouldn't they? This is the land of milk and honey, a land where hard work is rewarded with financial security and self-sufficiency. This is the land of religious freedom and freedom of speech. These and more are the ideologies that bring them here in droves. But along with these ideologies, there are always realities. On January 24, 2012, President Barack Obama delivered his State of the Union address to the nation. The themes woven into the address were not unfamiliar to those who have heard many such addresses in prior years.
Thank you. All right, please be seated.
Key themes in his address included deficit and debt reduction, education, energy, executive branch changes, government regulation, immigration reform, infrastructure, job creation, military successes, political divide, relief for homeowners, taxes, and veterans care. All of these topics are politically expedient and must be addressed, especially if you're wanting to be re-elected. President Obama exuded confidence that we would be able to conquer all of these problems together. In fact, he said the following, and I quote, "This nation is great because we built it together. This nation is great because we worked as a team. This nation is great because we get each other's backs." Now, at face value, what he said sounds pretty good, but as a Christian, I've got some questions. Aren't we a great nation because we believe in God? In God we trust? Look at the list of topics that he covered once again. Aren't there some things missing? I believe there are some very, very important things missing. Things that are vital to the health of our nation. From a Christian perspective, the health of our nation is not good. Our nation is not strong, and there are many things that need to be addressed. In fact, the state of our nation is so bad that I'm beginning to wonder if its course can be changed at all. I mentioned earlier that with ideologies there come realities, and the reality for America is that we as a nation are crumbling from within. There are things at work in the very core of our country that are actually undermining our pursuit of happiness. Like a beautiful home infested with termites, great damage is done before anyone is aware of their presence. Slowly, there is a darkness that is covering our land. With a severely deteriorated foundation, it's doubtful whether our nation will actually be able to survive. The recent centennial commemoration of the sinking of the Titanic should be a reminder to us all. Nothing is so invincible that it cannot fall. With the building of the Titanic, many mistakes were made and shortcuts were taken. As a result, the ship was lost and nearly all souls aboard. So take heed now as we look at these issues that are eating away at the foundation of our country. These are the realities that we must face. The first reality is the decay of honor, honesty, and integrity. Without these noble traits, the foundation of our nation is undermined and the very fabric of our society is weakened. Lack of these noble traits encourages and breeds corruption. It is particularly damaging to our sense of well-being when we see corruption in law enforcement. The recent scandal involving the U.S. Secret Service has shaken our nation to the core, certainly something that we did not expect from such a high agency within the U.S. government. Too often now we're hearing and seeing brutalities, payoffs, and organized crime within law enforcement agencies. There seems to be a growing disregard for the law. Many people today have the attitude that I'm above the law. Many believe there's only one law: don't get caught. Perhaps there's a connection between corruption in the government, corruption in law enforcement, and disregard for the law. Reality number 2. There's a loss of fairness and civility in our government and in our American society in general. The The ultimate example of this is the gridlock that's been created in Congress between the Democrats and the Republicans. Look at these headlines and reflect on what we've been experiencing as the American people as we've watched the Democrats and Republicans battle it out, getting nowhere. Another area where fairness to the American people has been lost is deep pocket lobbying. Is it fair that the money of special interest groups speaks louder than the voices of the constituents? And what about selfish pork barrel spending? Is it fair that some representative wants to build a bridge to nowhere back in his home state at the expense of all of the taxpayers nationwide? It seems like everyone these days has a sense of entitlement. If it exists and I can take it, I'm entitled to it. Reality number 3, devaluation of human life. For the Christian, abortion tops the list when it comes to devaluation of human life. Abortionists say there is no life in the womb until the fetus reaches the stage of viability at which it can survive outside of the womb. Clearly, this is nonsense and blatant self-serving denial. It's hard to believe that women in America are being encouraged to choose death for their children. Infanticide in America became legal with the Roe v. Wade decision on January 22, 1973. Ironically, it's the U.S. Center for Disease Control that's been tracking abortion since Roe v. Wade in 1973. Here we see that the number of abortions per 1,000 live births has been increasing since 1973 until a peak in 1984. Since then, there's been a slight decline and a leveling off. This graph was created by the National Right to Life organization based on information and statistics from the CDC and the Guttmacher Institute. These graphs clearly show an extended peak from 1980 to 1990. During this time, abortions in America were running 1.6 million per year. Christians can't be satisfied until these graphs drop to zero. According to the Guttmacher Institute, about half of American women will have an unintended pregnancy and nearly 1/3 will have an abortion by age 45. Is the option of euthanasia coming for the institutionalized elderly? Serious discussions are being had by our president and politicians regarding the high costs of sustaining a life that is terminally ill, this in light of rising Medicare and Medicaid costs. This leads us to reality number 4, moral decay in America. Leading the list of moral decay is the rise in use of and access to pornography. The following information sheet can be obtained from pornographyaddiction.com. The information presented here is startling to say the least. It's appalling to learn that 2 of the top 100 internet websites are pornographic. 12% of all websites on the internet are pornographic. That's 24,644,172 adult websites. How can it be that an estimated 40 million Americans are regular visitors to porn sites? And 2.5 billion emails a day are pornographic. That's 8% of all emails. An astounding 25% of search engine requests are pornography related. That's 68 million a day. Only 3% of adult websites require age verification. The least popular day of the year for porn viewing is Thanksgiving. The most popular day of the week is Sunday. 10% of porn users admit to being addicted to pornography. The average age at which a child first sees pornography online is only 11 years old. 1 in every 3 women view pornography. An astounding 20% of men and 13% of women admit to watching porn online while at work. And 70% of men aged 18 through 24 visit porn sites in a typical month. Along with pornography is the rise in the sex offender population. This press announcement was released on January 23 of 2012 by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Notice the headline says, number of registered sex offenders in the U.S. nears 750,000. The subhead says registered sex offender numbers increased 23% in the past 5 years. California, Texas, and Florida top the list. The press release goes on to say that just since June of 2011, 7,555 registered sex offenders have been added to the list. It goes on to say that in 2006, there were 606,816 registered sex offenders in the United States. Today's numbers show an increase of 23.2%. Along with the rise of pornography and the rise in sexual offenders has naturally been the rise in rape and incest. Figures provided by the U.S. Department of Justice Federal Bureau of Investigation show that in 1960 there were 17,190 rapes out of a population of 179,300,000. That's 1 in every 10,500. In 2010, there were 84,767 rapes with a population that had increased to 308,750,000. That's 1 in every 3,642. So the figures show that over a 50-year period starting in 1960, rape had increased by 300%. Federal Bureau of Investigation figures also show that over the same period of time, violent crime increased about 250%. That with 1 in every 622 people back in 1960, increasing to 1 in every 248 people in 2010. So what's causing all of this moral decay? Well, think about it, and in a few minutes we'll get back to it and talk about root cause. Reality number 5, financial decay. First, we'll do a quick snapshot overview that reveals the financial state of the Union. Then, we'll take a deeper look to see how we got where we are today. The rise in corruption in key institutions such as banks and Wall Street. The fattening of government requires more government workers, more infrastructure to support them, more technology to enable them, an increased tax burden on the taxpayers, and fewer private sector taxpayers to pay for it all. The rise in poverty exacerbates our financial status. Over 43% of all Americans are low income or poor. That means they cannot contribute to the tax base. This results in a significant increased burden to middle and upper income taxpayers. There's been a sharp increase in deficit spending starting with 2008, over $1 trillion per year. There's been a sharp rise in the national debt because of the deficit spending. Since the 1980s, we've paid down the national debt by raiding the Social Security Trust Fund, raiding federal workers' retirement trust funds, and offshore borrowing, such as from China. Now let's dig a little deeper. We'll begin by taking a look at the federal budget to see what the major line items are. A major portion of the budget is defense and security at 20%. Next is a large bucket which contains things like federal retirees benefits, veterans benefits, research, infrastructure, education, etc. These totaling 19%. Next are the safety net programs, also known as welfare or public assistance, at a total of 13%. The next bucket includes all of the Medicaid programs and the Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP, totaling 7%. The next large bucket includes Social Security and Social Security Disability Insurance at a total of 20%. Medicare all by itself takes up 14% of the budget. The last major budget item is just the interest on the national debt at 6%. That brings us to a total of 99% with a 1% rounding error. The total dollar amount to meet the 2011 U.S. budget was $3.6 trillion. Of that, $2.3 trillion came from taxes or revenues. The remaining $1.3 trillion had to be borrowed. In other words, this was the deficit that was added to the national debt. Now that we know where the money is going, let's start with a clean sheet and build a model of our economy. We'll start with government in the middle, and that includes federal, state, and local. We'll place all revenue sources on the left and all expenditures on the right. The federal budget accounts for most expenditures, but nevertheless we'll pull some of the major buckets out for graphical clarity. Now, as you can see, we have an awfully large number of people on the expenditure side or the receiving side. That includes about 3 million military personnel, half active duty and half active reserve, about 3 million federal employees, about 15 million state and local employees, and a combined 150 million low-income and poor. Admittedly, there may be some overlap between the low-income and the state and local employees categories. These figures are from the U.S. Census Bureau and reflect numbers and statistics from year 2010. Next, we'll add the sources of revenue to our model. Our largest source of revenue comes from the nation's tax base. Well, that includes taxes from payroll, FICA, capital gains, sales, and from businesses and corporations. Other sources of revenue are not as attractive because they increase the national debt. Those include dipping into the Social Security and federal employee trust funds, borrowing from other countries, and the sale of U.S. Treasury bonds. Now, from our president on down, we can all point our finger at many of these things and offer suggestions for remedy. Voices from various corners say we have to reduce the federal budget. Others say we have to reduce the size of our military. Many say let's shrink government by reducing the number of federal employees, and also at the state and local levels. Others say that we need to reduce our safety net welfare programs for the low income and the poor. Then there are others who say we not only have to reduce the size of government, but we also have to raise taxes if we ever hope to get out of debt. And speaking of debt, we have to pay back Social Security and the federal employee trust funds. And while we're at it, we have to buy back those treasury bonds and give that money back to China. With our national debt approaching $16 trillion, we most likely will have to raise taxes and find ways of reducing the size of government by reducing programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, safety net programs, and also reductions in force for military and other federal employees. But remember, solutions say nothing about root cause. Without this understanding, we may not be able to get out of debt, and history will keep repeating itself. We can't forget that recovery and stimulus programs were partly necessitated by corruption and poor practices at banks and Wall Street. These are examples of causes, but not root causes. We'll discuss that momentarily. For now, let's look at a few other areas within our federal budget where expenses are high and cause and root cause must be identified. One of those areas is law enforcement, where there's a continuous challenge to resources. This is due to the continual rise in illegal immigration, drug trafficking, drug use, human trafficking, violent crime, rape and incest, and more. These that I've listed may be the cause for rising expenditures, but are they the root cause? Medicare and Medicaid combined represents a huge portion of the federal budget at 21%. Abuse and fraud are rampant. Congress has been working hard to identify causes for this rampant abuse and fraud. New legislation is coming, and government is going to expand just a little bit more to try to get a handle on these problems. But there are some real reasons why Congress will not be able to address root cause. Related to Medicare and Medicaid is the general decline in the health of the American people. Healthcare costs across the country have soared with the rise in sexually transmitted disease and obesity. Despite the high cost in dollars and lives, the challenge remains. If these problems are not addressed at root cause, they will never be solved. Now it's time to explore root cause as we examine our last American reality, spiritual decay. It's hard to say when spiritual decay began here in America, but what I can say is that over the 62 years of my life, I have seen and experienced the insidious effects on the American people. As I think back, many milestones of spiritual decay come to mind. I think about the rise of a new religion called evolution. Under the guise of science, the few demand the blind faith of its followers, offering no compensation for what is taken away from them. Concurrent with the rise in evolution was the rise in atheism, where it is taught that there is no God, there is no ultimate accountability, no hell, no judgment, and the result is no conscience. Then came the use of separation of church and state as a weapon against Christianity. The results have been the stopping of the display of the Ten Commandments, along with the display of crosses, Christmas trees, or any religious symbols on and in public property. Its use has also, in some cases, been successful in silencing prayer in schools or at school events. Then there's the banning of creationism in schools and universities. The Roe v. Wade decision of 1973 brought on the devaluation of human life, abortion. We've also seen the rise of Sodom and Gomorrah in America. It's no surprise that open attacks are increasing on Christianity only. It's quite common now to see this in primetime television programs. We are also seeing the redefining of marriage. The use of profanity and obscenities on primetime TV has increased tremendously. Much of this is rubbing off on Christians as well. Many are accepting profanity in their daily lives and in the media. More and more Christians are accepting the secular practice of sex before marriage. It's startling as well to know that Christians are cohabitating before marriage. Many Christians now have an appetite and tolerance for R-rated movies. And so it goes. Spiritual decay has left this nation empty, without direction and lawless, where each citizen sets his or her own rules and has no regard for God, others, or even themselves. We're teaching our children that they evolved. They are the same as all other animals. They have no souls, there is no God, there is no afterlife, and there is no ultimate accountability. Their moral compass has been taken from them with nothing but emptiness to replace it. Are we then surprised by the results? So this then is the ultimate reality. As a nation, we are reaping what we have sown. Our punishment for it is intrinsic with the decay. Some enthusiastic TV preachers have said that the destruction from tornadoes in the Midwest is the direct result of sin by the people affected. How shallow. It is not God or nature that has turned against us. It is we. Tell me that bigger government, more laws, and more law enforcers will change these realities. No, they won't. These realities will continue to stand and grow until the root cause is thoroughly addressed. No government, agency, or man has the ability to do this. We are doomed now to fruitless attempts to address symptoms and results of a root cause that we cannot touch: spiritual decay. So that's my State of the Union. An ordinary man with boots on the ground, eyes wide open, offering a Christian perspective.